Brielle adjusted the brown paper bags in her arms, struggling to balance them as she stepped off the elevator onto the top floor of the most luxurious apartment building in the city. The Penthouse. She had no idea who lived here, only that the orders were always expensive imported cheeses, fine wine, the kind of groceries she could never afford on her paycheck. She knocked on the massive double doors, her heart pounding from the effort of carrying the heavy load. A few seconds later, the door swung open, and she was met with the sight of a tall, striking man with piercing blue eyes and a sharp jawline. He was dressed in a fitted black shirt, sleeves rolled up, revealing strong forearms. He looked at her, then at the bags, a frown forming between his brows. "You're not the usual delivery person," he said, his voice smooth and commanding. Brielle straightened. "No, I'm covering for my friend today." She shifted the bags slightly. "Where do you want these?" The man stepped aside, motioning for her to enter. "Kitchen," he said, watching her closely as she walked past him. Her breath caught as she took in the penthouse. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed a breathtaking view of the city skyline, and the space was decorated in sleek, modern furnishings. Everything here screamed wealth. This wasn't just a nice apartment, it was a palace in the sky. "Pretty fancy," she muttered under her breath as she set the bags down on the marble counter. The man leaned against the island, arms crossed, his gaze still on her. "You say that like it's a bad thing." Brielle turned, meeting his amused expression. "Not bad. Just different from where I live," she admitted. His lips twitched. "And where is that?" She hesitated. "A tiny studio above a laundromat." He let out a low chuckle. "Sounds cozy. That's a nice way to put it." She glanced around, suddenly feeling out of place. "Anyway, I should go." Before she could leave, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a few crisp $100 bills. "For the trouble." Her eyes widened. "This is way too much." He shrugged. "Consider it a tip." Brielle hesitated, then shook her head. "I can't take this." His brows lifted in surprise. "Most people wouldn't say no." "Well, I'm not most people," she said, giving him a small smile before turning to leave. As she reached the door, he called after her. "What's your name?" She paused, glancing back over her shoulder. "Brielle." The man studied her for a moment, then nodded. "I'm Tristan." She gave him one last look before stepping into the elevator, the doors closing between them. What she didn't know was that Tristan Montgomery, the billionaire CEO of Montgomery Enterprises, was watching her leave with an expression he hadn't worn in years: curiosity. And for the first time in a long time, he found himself wanting to see someone again. Brielle didn't expect to return to the penthouse. In fact, she had convinced herself that her brief encounter with Tristan Montgomery was nothing more than a fleeting interaction, one that would disappear as quickly as it had happened. But life had other plans. 2 days later, her friend Jenny, who usually handled the upscale deliveries, came down with a fever. Brielle had barely set foot in the grocery store before her boss flagged her down. "I need you to handle another Penthouse delivery," he said, handing her the receipt. Her stomach twisted when she saw the address. She debated saying no, but it was hard enough making rent without turning down shifts. So, she loaded the same high-end groceries into the cooler bags and made her way back to the towering building. This time, when the elevator doors slid open, she wasn't caught off guard by the lavish surroundings. But when she knocked on the heavy doors, they opened almost instantly, as if Tristan had been waiting. His expression shifted the moment he saw her, something unreadable flickering behind his sharp blue eyes. "You again," he said. Brielle held up the bags. "Looks like it." Instead of stepping aside like before, he leaned against the doorframe, studying her. "Is this a coincidence, or are you just looking for an excuse to see me again?" She let out a laugh. "Trust me, I'm just a backup delivery girl." Something about her answer made the corner of his mouth twitch, but he finally stepped back and gestured for her to enter. As she moved past him, she caught the faintest scent of his cologne, rich, sophisticated, something expensive she couldn't name. She set down the bags in the kitchen, noticing that the previous groceries she had delivered were still barely touched. "Do you even eat any of this?" she asked, turning to face him. Tristan walked to the counter, slipping his hands into his pockets. "Not really. My assistant orders it for me." Brielle frowned. "Then why do you keep getting deliveries?" He exhaled, as if the question forced him to acknowledge something he hadn't considered before. "Habit, I suppose." She glanced around. "You live alone?" His jaw tightened slightly. "I do." For a man who had everything: wealth, a breathtaking home, a life most people could only dream of, he seemed strangely detached from it all. Before she could stop herself, she said, "That sounds lonely." He studied her again, longer this time. "And you? Do you live alone?" She hesitated, debating how much to share. "No. I have a younger brother. He's in college, but I help him with expenses." Something in Tristan's expression shifted, as if he hadn't expected that answer. "That's a lot of responsibility," he said. She shrugged. "Family takes care of each other." There was a pause, a beat of silence that felt heavier than it should have. Then, before things could get too personal, she straightened. "Anyway, I should get going." Tristan reached for his wallet again, but she held up a hand before he could pull out the bills. "I told you last time I don't need a huge tip." He arched a brow. "And I told you last time, most people wouldn't say no. I guess I'm still not most people." For a moment, neither of them moved. Then, something unreadable passed through his gaze, an emotion too fleeting to name. "Clearly," he murmured. Brielle turned to leave, but before she reached the door, Tristan's voice stopped her. "Brielle." She glanced back. "Come back tomorrow." "Not for a delivery," he said. "Just come back." Her heart stuttered. It was the last thing she expected. And yet, as she rode the elevator down, she realized something she wasn't ready to admit. She wanted to say yes. Brielle hadn't planned on returning. At least, that's what she told herself. But the memory of Tristan's invitation lingered, his words playing over in her mind long after she had left the penthouse. There had been something in his voice, something quiet but certain. He hadn't asked? He had told her to come back. And the most ridiculous part? She wanted to. Still, she waited a full day before making a decision. When she finally stepped into the sleek lobby of the high-rise again, she barely convinced herself it was just curiosity. The elevator ride felt longer this time. As the doors slid open, she expected to feel out of place, but when she knocked, Tristan opened the door almost immediately. He wasn't in his usual polished attire. Instead, he wore a navy sweater and dark slacks, his sleeves pushed up as if he had been doing something with his hands. There was something different in his expression, to a quiet satisfaction, like he had known she would come. "I wasn't sure you meant it," Brielle admitted as she stepped inside. Tristan studied her for a moment. "I don't say things I don't mean." The air between them felt heavier than before, charged with something unspoken. Then he turned, motioning toward the living room. "You hungry?" Brielle arched a brow, glancing around. "Are you offering to cook?" A low chuckle escaped him. "Hardly. But I did order something that isn't imported cheese and overpriced wine." She followed him toward the open kitchen, where a takeout bag sat on the counter. It was from a small Italian place she recognized, not the kind of place someone with his wealth usually ordered from. "You eat normal food?" she teased. Tristan pulled out 2 plates. "I figured I'd make an exception." Something about that answer made warmth curl in her chest. He wasn't just eating this. He had ordered it for her. As he plated the food, Brielle took a seat at the massive island, watching him move through the space. The kitchen was pristine, the kind of place that looked more like a showroom than something actually used. "You don't cook at all?" she asked. Tristan set a plate in front of her before leaning against the counter. "Never learned." Brielle tilted her head. "Not even eggs?" A rare hint of amusement flickered in his gaze. "I could probably manage to ruin them." She laughed, shaking her head. "That's almost impressive." As they ate, A comfortable silence settled between them. It was strange, this easy rhythm they had fallen into. She had known him for barely any time at all, and yet, sitting here, it didn't feel awkward. After a few minutes, Tristan leaned back slightly, his gaze roaming over her. "So, tell me something about you." Brielle swallowed her bite, considering. "Like what?" He shrugged. "Anything." She tapped her fork against the plate. "Okay. I once tried to start a business." That seemed to catch his interest. "What kind?" She hesitated. "A bakery." "Just a small one. I wanted to make custom pastries, things you couldn't find in places like chain coffee shops." Tristan's expression shifted, something unreadable passing through his eyes. What happened? A tightness formed in her chest, one she had buried a long time ago. "Didn't have the money. I saved up for years, but it wasn't enough. And when my brother needed help with tuition." She trailed off, shaking her head. "It just wasn't the right time." Tristan was silent for a moment, as if weighing his response. "Do you still want it?" Brielle forced a small smile. "I don't think about it much anymore." He didn't look convinced. Before he could push further, she turned the conversation. "What about you? What made you want to run a company?" Tristan exhaled, his gaze flickering toward the window. "Didn't have a choice." That answer made her pause. "What do you mean?" He tapped his thumb against the counter. "It was my father's company. He built it from the ground up. When he died, I took over." Brielle watched him carefully. There was something in the way he said it, something colder than she expected. "Was that what you wanted?" she asked softly. Tristan's jaw tightened slightly. "It didn't matter what I wanted." The air between them grew heavier again, the weight of his words settling into the space. After a moment, he turned back to her, something shifting in his expression. "I don't usually do this." She frowned. "Do what?" His fingers drummed lightly against the countertop. "Sit and talk. Let people in." Her chest tightened at that. "Why me?" Tristan didn't answer right away. When he finally spoke, his voice was quieter than before. "I don't know yet." A shiver ran down her spine, but she didn't dare look away. For the first time since she had met him, she realized something. Tristan Montgomery wasn't just wealthy. He wasn't just powerful. He was lonely. And somehow, in the strangest, most unexpected ways, so was she. Brielle didn't know how it happened, but after that night, she kept coming back. It started with casual visits, him ordering food that didn't come from a 5-star restaurant, her sitting at that marble island while they talked about things that had nothing to do with his wealth or her struggles. But slowly, the lines blurred. She found herself lingering longer each time, sometimes staying well past midnight, watching the city lights stretch endlessly beneath the penthouse windows. Tristan never rushed her out. If anything, he seemed reluctant when she finally left, his gaze following her until the doors closed behind her. But tonight was different. When she arrived, the usual takeout bags weren't on the counter. Instead, Tristan stood near the floor-to-ceiling windows, his hands in his pockets, his expression unreadable. Something in the air had changed. He turned as she approached, his blue eyes darker than usual. "Come with me." Brielle hesitated. "Where?" His lips parted, but instead of answering, he simply held out his hand. There was something in the way he looked at her, something certain, something unshakable. And despite every warning in her head, she placed her hand in his. The moment his fingers closed around hers, warmth spread through her, settling deep in her chest. Without another word, he led her to the elevator. As they descended, Brielle's pulse quickened. She had no idea where he was taking her, but for some reason, she wasn't afraid. When the doors opened, they stepped into the underground garage. A sleek black car waited, its engine already purring softly. Tristan opened the passenger door for her, waiting until she slid inside before closing it and moving to the driver's seat. The city passed in a blur of neon and headlights as they drove in silence. The tension between them was thick, charged with something unspoken. Brielle finally turned to him. Are you going to tell me where we're going? Tristan's fingers flexed on the steering wheel. You'll see. Minutes later, they pulled up to a quiet street lined with small businesses. Brielle recognized the area instantly. Her chest tightened. She turned to Tristan, but he was already watching her. Come on. He stepped out, rounding the car before opening her door. She hesitated only for a moment before following him. They stopped in front of a storefront, one she hadn't seen in years. The last time she was here, she had been standing on the other side of the glass, staring at the empty space inside, imagining what it could have been. Her heart pounded as Tristan pulled a key from his pocket and unlocked the door. Brielle's breath caught. The space was completely renovated, white countertops, gleaming kitchen equipment, a display case waiting to be filled. It was exactly how she had envisioned it all those years ago. She turned to Tristan, her pulse racing. What is this? He leaned against the nearest counter, watching her carefully. It's yours. She shook her head, unable to process what he was saying. No. That's not Tristan, this isn't. He stepped closer, his voice steady. You told me once that you stopped thinking about it. His gaze softened. I don't believe that. Her throat tightened. He gestured toward the space. Everything is ready. The permits, the equipment, the startup costs, it's all taken care of. Brielle's hands trembled. This is too much. Tristan reached for her, his fingers brushing against hers. You don't owe me anything. She swallowed hard, emotions crashing over her. Then why? His jaw tensed, as if he was fighting something inside himself. Then, finally, his voice dropped to a whisper. Because I love you. The words hung between them, heavy and undeniable. Brielle's breath hitched. Tristan exhaled sharply, as if he had been holding that in for too long. I've never done this before, he admitted. I don't know how to say the right things, I don't know how to. She didn't let him finish. Her hands cupped his face, pulling him down as she pressed her lips to his. The moment their mouths met, the rest of the world disappeared. Tristan's arms wrapped around her, holding her as if he was afraid she might slip away. The kiss was slow, deep, filled with every emotion they had been dancing around for weeks. When they finally broke apart, Tristan rested his forehead against hers. Brielle's heart pounded as she whispered, I love you too. His grip on her tightened just slightly, as if those words had unraveled something inside him. Brielle looked around the bakery, her chest swelling with something she hadn't felt in years, a dream no longer out of reach. And then, she looked back at him. Tristan Montgomery, the man who had everything, had just given her the one thing she had thought was impossible. And in return, without meaning to, she had given him something too. Herself. Brielle had never known overwhelming joy could feel so much like free falling. In the days that followed Tristan's confession and the impossible gift he had given her, everything shifted. It wasn't just that she now had a place to build her dream, the bakery she had once let slip through her fingers, but that Tristan was there, beside her, making sure she actually reached for it this time. He didn't just hand her the keys and expect her to figure it out alone. Instead, he pushed open doors she never would have had access to, connected her with suppliers, and helped her navigate the endless permits and paperwork. But more than that, he truly listened to the kind of business she wanted to build. Late nights were spent in what was now her bakery, both of them sitting on the empty countertops as she planned menus and debated layouts. Tristan had a sharp mind for business, but he never tried to turn her dream into something cold or corporate. Instead, he helped her refine it, make it stronger. And somewhere in between the planning and the late-night conversations, they fell into something deeper. She had been afraid, at first, that their relationship would feel unbalanced, that the weight of his wealth and influence would overshadow everything else. But Tristan never let that happen. He treated her decisions with the same respect he would if she were a business partner, never once making her feel like she owed him for anything. The more time they spent together, the more she saw the man beneath the reserved, powerful exterior. He wasn't just the billionaire CEO who lived in a penthouse high above the world. He was the same man who had admitted he had never learned to cook. The man who had spent years running a company that had never truly been his choice. The man who watched her with quiet fascination whenever she talked about her passion, as if he had never met someone who loved something so deeply. And every time she caught him looking at her like that, her heart stumbled. One evening, as she worked on a test batch of pastries, she felt Tristan's presence before he even spoke. He leaned against the counter, watching her with that unreadable intensity she had come to recognize. She set down her mixing spoon and wiped her hands on a towel. "You're staring." His mouth twitched. "I like watching you work." She raised an eyebrow. "You say that like I'm doing something fascinating." Tristan stepped closer, his fingers brushing a stray bit of flour from her cheek. "You are." The warmth in his voice sent a shiver down her spine. She exhaled, trying to steady her pulse. "You're distracting." His lips curved slightly. "Am I?" Before she could respond, his hands found her waist, pulling her flush against him. The scent of him clean, crisp, something distinctly him wrapped around her. She placed her hands on his chest, feeling the steady beat of his heart beneath her fingertips. "You know, if you keep this up, I'm never going to finish this batch." Tristan's thumb traced slow circles against her hip. "I think they can wait." She laughed softly, shaking her head. "You're impossible." But she didn't pull away. Instead, she tilted her head up, and the moment their lips met, everything else faded. Their kiss was slow, unhurried, the kind that made time stretch and bend around them. Tristan wasn't just kissing her, he was pouring something unspoken into the moment, something that made her knees weak and her heart ache in the best way. When they finally pulled apart, he rested his forehead against hers. Brielle exhaled shakily. "You really don't do anything halfway, do you?" Tristan's fingers tightened slightly on her waist. "Not when it comes to you." Her chest tightened at the quiet admission. She had never expected this. Never imagined that walking into his penthouse with an armful of groceries would lead to this to him. And yet, somehow, every step had felt inevitable. As she looked up at him, at the man who had somehow become everything she never knew she needed, she realized one thing with absolute certainty. She wasn't falling anymore. She had already landed. The bakery's soft glow spilled onto the quiet street as Brielle stood behind the counter, rolling out delicate sheets of pastry. The space felt different now, not just a dream, but a reality taking shape under her hands. The scent of butter and sugar filled the air, mingling with the faint trace of Tristan's cologne as he leaned against the doorway, watching her with quiet intensity. She had grown used to his presence here, the way he would slip in after a long day, his suit jacket discarded, sleeves rolled up as if he belonged in this space as much as she did. He never interrupted, only observed, as if watching her create something from nothing fascinated him in a way he didn't quite understand. Tonight, however, there was something else in his gaze. A quiet determination, a weight behind his usual calm. Brielle wiped her hands on her apron and glanced at him. "You look like you have something on your mind." Tristan stepped forward, his fingers brushing the edge of the counter. "I do." The serious note in his voice sent a ripple of unease through her. She set down the rolling pin, giving him her full attention. "What is it?" He hesitated only a fraction before meeting her eyes. "There's something I need to ask you." Her heart stuttered. Tristan had never been the type to hesitate. His confidence was effortless, his decisions absolute. The fact that he was hesitating now made her pulse quicken. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box, flipping it open with a quiet certainty that stole the breath from her lungs. Inside, nestled against the dark fabric, was a ring. But not just any ring. The design was intricate yet understated, a single brilliant diamond set in a delicate band. It wasn't flashy or overwhelming. It was perfect. Brielle's hands trembled as she looked up at him. Tristan inhaled slowly, as if steadying himself before speaking. "I knew I wanted you in my life from the moment you walked into my penthouse." His voice was firm, but there was something raw beneath it, something unguarded. "You walked in carrying groceries, refusing to take more than you earned, And I realized I had never met anyone like you. Her throat tightened. He took a step closer, his gaze never leaving hers. I love you, Brielle. I love the way you fight for what you want, the way you refuse to let the world change you. I love the way you make me feel like a man, not a name on a company's letterhead. He exhaled, his fingers tightening around the box. I don't want a life without you in it. Marry me. The words hung between them, heavy with meaning. Brielle felt the weight of her emotions press against her ribs, her heart hammering so hard she thought it might burst. For so long, she had been the one who fought. Fought to keep her brother afloat, fought to survive in a world that never made things easy. But here, standing in front of Tristan, she didn't have to fight. She didn't have to prove anything. He already saw her. Tears burned at the edges of her vision as she reached for his hand, her fingers curling around his. Yes, she whispered. A slow breath escaped him, as if he had been holding it in. Then, without hesitation, he slid the ring onto her finger, his grip tightening around hers as if anchoring her to this moment. Before she could speak, he pulled her into his arms, his lips capturing hers in a kiss that left no room for doubt. This wasn't just love. This was everything. The bakery was alive with warmth, the scent of fresh pastries mingling with the soft hum of conversation. The grand opening had drawn a crowd, but Brielle barely noticed the people milling about, their voices blending into a blur. Her gaze was locked on Tristan, who stood near the register, sleeves rolled up as he handed a customer a carefully wrapped pastry. The sight of him so effortlessly at ease in her world sent a rush of emotion through her. It had been 6 months since he had proposed, 6 months of building something together, not just a bakery, but a life. And now, standing here, watching him, she knew with absolute certainty. She had never been meant for a life of struggle. She had been meant for this. For him. As if sensing her stare, Tristan turned, his gaze finding hers across the room. A slow, knowing smile spread across his lips. And in that moment, surrounded by the life they had built, she knew. She was exactly where she was meant to be,